our next feature presentation where Ryan will return, this time talking about a very different topic of conversation with Jennifer Saenz, who is the Global CMO and President of Global Foods at PepsiCo. They're going to be talking about how new trends and iconic brands fit together, and also about how she juggles holding those two sort of different areas in her job. I think that we have a lot to learn from her. I know I've been really excited for this session. I know Ryan's been really excited for this session. And we're super, super pumped to welcome her. While they talk, we will also have a live visual artist from Ink Factory. Her name's Ariana. She's been with us all morning. She'll be with us the rest of the day, who will be taking visual notes on the presentation. You can keep that screen as large or small as you want, but it's been really cool and valuable for me, I know, and I've heard from a lot of you, to watch as she does that, considering we have no slides, and it is just this insane back and forth conversation that's going on. And sometimes it's nice to see someone else pull out some of the key points of that, and it's really pretty. Also, while they talk, I will be drinking this Gatorade because hydration is important, and it wasn't a paid ad, but you know, Pepsi's a household name, and we're excited to have them here. So over to you, Ryan and Jen.
Thank you. Jen, were you able to come off of mute? We had a mute issue. Let me see if Jen's here. Can somebody unmute Jen?
Yay, they just unmuted me.
All right. So
I'm here.
So Jen and I were going to pivot this entire talk to discuss our love for our Peloton experience, because that's what we were discussing in the green room, but we will actually stick to the script. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for joining.
I am so happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. We're going to have a lot of fun. We've got about 45 minutes together, folks, and we've got a lot to cover. So we're going to dive right in. So Jen, you have two extremely high profile jobs. So you're the global CMO at PepsiCo, and you're also the president of the foods business, which is the single business arm of PepsiCo. Talk to us about the scope of your role and a little bit of commentary on how you juggle both of those context switches that you go through day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a great combination of roles, and it keeps me balanced. I think they both make me better at doing the job overall. The president of foods role is essentially thinking about, hey, long term, where are we headed with our foods business? How can we think about our portfolio? When we look at consumer trends, what are the trends that we want to go after and really shape the future of our foods business, as well as thinking about the geographies that we operate in across the globe and how we might develop a portfolio that serves the consumer needs in the best way possible. So really thinking about business development for PepsiCo and the long term. On the CMO side, I think a lot about how we work as a function, a lot less on the content side, which I guess is kind of an untraditional focus for a CMO, but a lot more thinking about how the work gets done in a standardized fashion across PepsiCo. When you think about the operating processes and tools, when you think about the capabilities, and also how we make sure that we're managing talent and career with a really laser focus on what it takes to develop yourself in the organization, how we think about building people's careers globally, functionally, and really thinking about how to just build the next generation of future leaders of PepsiCo. Not just marketing leaders, but the future leaders of the company. So I think they're really interesting. The global CMO role is actually a relatively new one. Just in the last few months, the interesting thing about marketing at PepsiCo is it wasn't until very recently that we united as a global function. We had marketing, we had the discipline of marketing, but it was operated and run pretty independently across the different sectors and business units that we were in. So this is really a great opportunity for us to get to standardized approaches and build capabilities that I think are, best in class and advantaged in the market.
I dig it. And we'll obviously come on to some of the capability stuff in a little bit, but what strikes me is just the servant leadership. If, part of the capability is the rise of the next wave of talent within the organization. And I think it's interesting because CMOs always get painted as these artists, but I think your default of elevating the team around you is really inspiring. So you have a business, very big business with hundreds of brands operating in hundreds of countries that help feed and quench the thirst of consumers everywhere. What are some of the big changes you see afoot in consumer trends today in your world?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's a lot that we keep our eyes on from a consumer preference standpoint and just need. There's some trends that I would say are everlasting and we don't want to forget them. There's still very much a need for indulgence and fun and entertainment and enjoyment across food and beverage. People, when they're eating and drinking, they want to enjoy it. And that's, I know it's silly to classify that as a trend, but it's not going away. And in fact, I think with COVID, people have needed an uplift and a release more than ever. But at the same time, there's a heightened level of consciousness on health and wellness. What is the function of, the things that I'm eating and drinking? How can I really think about health as it relates to that? And health for myself and my body, but also health for the planet. And so happy Earth Day. Sustainability and transparency is also something that is starting to drive choice and has been driving choice within the food and beverage landscape. So I'd say those are three things that we're very conscious of. I wouldn't say they're new, but I think they're accelerating, and there's nuances within them that if we get super granular, we're paying attention to. But those are three key drivers.
I dig it, and I've personally been very impressed with a lot of the moves PepsiCo has been making to really reduce carbon footprint emissions and plastic consumption and everything else. And so it's great to see a leader in the space really leading from the front. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about talent. So business is changing like crazy. There are constants. People want to enjoy their snacks, but there's this heightened sense of what does this do to my body? What does this do to the planet that you're juggling? And also there's a big buzzword around us, digital transformation. How do you see the talent landscape in corporate insights and corporate marketing changing? What are some of the things that aren't changing, but what are some of the things that are from your experience?
Yeah, I think the basics aren't changing. We still need to be amazing strategists when it comes to thinking about the business, because ultimately that's why we're here. We're trying to drive a return. We're trying to drive a growth. We're trying to win in the marketplace. So we have to be great strategists always. As a marketer though, or as an insights professional, our job is to really think about what are those consumer opportunities in the marketplace first that will lead to the growth. How do we find those unmet needs? How do we think about occasions differently? So I think you really need that consumer centricity now more than ever. It was always important, but I think it's heightened in importance, particularly because the funnel of choice, the move to digital, is changing. It's changing very rapidly. So I need to figure out how to collapse that funnel, deliver you a brand message, and get you to click almost in the same view, which is challenging. So there's a lot of capability that's new. I need to now, understand a lot of the technology and analytics that historically, and it just depends where you work and the industry that you work in, but in many cases, those were siloed or potentially even outsourced or held at an arm's length. And more often, the marketer or the insights professional, they need to own the data. They need to own the analytics. They need to understand it. And they need to very quickly get from looking at the data to generating a hypothesis and a conclusion, and then acting on that to make an impact. And that sequence is just compressing. Which makes it so they've got to be self-sustaining in that and really create self-service solution sets across that. But gosh, we need profiles of people who, are almost like consumer anthropologists. We need data scientist types. We need, financial types. And I think you need a whole range of talent to build out a team that's going to have diverse perspective and really be able to go after opportunity in a different way.
I love it. So diversity and sort of specialized skill sets, the recognition that you need to ingest new technologies and capability, but also, as you say, the constant of being able to unearth opportunities that can yield growth. So it's interesting. In a few of our other talks too, Jen, we've talked about what's changing, but also what's not. And so that whole being able to spot opportunities and capitalize hasn't changed.
You cannot forget the basics. And that's, I think it is dangerous as you get pulled towards new developments or new technologies, that in this lure and the pursuit of some of those, you almost forget the basics. Like, hey, know your audience. What do they want? What do they want to hear from you? What are some of those messages? It's harder and harder to get those technologies and the data to work for you if you don't understand the why behind want to achieve and who it's for. So we can't forget that. There should be a lot of humanity in data-driven marketing. And we sometimes we forget that.
That's really important. So I didn't pay Jen to say this, but when we were talking, getting to know each other during the preamble up to the summit, Jen said to me that the partnership with Insights should be the most important for any CMO. And I was really relieved to hear that, because I think Insights sometimes does a bad job of branding ourselves or getting out of the way. And but obviously, as you say, customer centricity is sort of everything. So talk to me about Insights partnership, what it means to you, and how you define, from a capability perspective, but also capitalizing growth perspective, a strong Insights partnership, which I know you have with Steph and his team around the world.
Yes, Stefan's awesome. I saw him actually on the call.
Where is he?
Thank you for joining. He's just an amazing partner, and I would tell you there's certain characteristics, and Stefan is a huge champion of this. I would classify, and this is generalization, right? But hey, there's two buckets that you can think about, and I think historically, it's easy to almost think of Insights. It's creating knowledge. Hey, am I doing it for knowledge sake? Or where I think we've transitioned, and where I think Stefan is incredibly focused, is saying, hey, it's not just about, can we capture knowledge about trends in the market and consumer and that type of understanding, but how do I translate that for impact? And I think the best Insights partner is focused on helping us figure out, how do we translate that to impact? How do we make sure that the knowledge that we're creating as a system and as an Insights function is really intended to create an impact? And that to me is the most important thing that the Insights partner can bring.
And this one isn't necessarily planned, but like those who maybe haven't crossed the chasm of sort of understanding that, maybe they're, we talked about this before. Some people in Insights roles, let's say they work for another company that isn't called PepsiCo, were procurement managers, market research managers, and now are being asked to do a lot more. So do you have any advice for those people in terms of how to cross that chasm and to develop, unlearn some skills that they might need to actually develop?
So there's a couple of things. I'd say, gosh, if you come from a background that's very different, a procurement manager or something like that, I think, I think one of the most important characteristics that a marketer and an Insights person needs to have is just, a curiosity, a curiosity for the world, a curiosity to learn, a curiosity. My hope is if they've transitioned into Insights, they're curious about the basics of marketing and they've learned some of those techniques. And they just need to sort of upskill, is what I would say. So go to school, read the book, How Brands Grow. We believe in it wholeheartedly at PepsiCo. And I think there's just learn the fundamentals would be part of that. But ultimately, the same skills that they were tapping into on procurement, what they were doing is they were trying to make an impact. They were identifying an opportunity and they were making an impact just through a different functional lens. So how are you translating that and figuring out how to make an impact? And there's so many different ways an Insights partner can make an impact. We can, things that Stefan and I work on together, how are we thinking about long-term portfolio strategy and what are the things that we can do together to shape that? But we're also looking at how within the skill set of our teams, can we make sure we're making an impact? So impact can be on the business, impact can be on the people. And the tool set that Stefan has developed is just the vision. it's able to be democratized. And when you can democratize that information and understanding, all of a sudden the amount of impact that you can make, because so many people have access to it, it's user friendly. I need some data scientists on the team, but now my everyday marketer insights person can just work with an easy user interface and have the benefit of that data in front of them. And to me, that's also impact that you can make. So I think just rethinking why you're there, what's your purpose, is really important, and understanding the basics like we talked about. It's not just about new shiny things, but the basics.
Yeah, the fundamentals of marketing are actually still important despite all the buzzwords. So I want to stay on the insights transformation for a bit. This is, as I said to you, a fairly insights heavy audience. And I think this whole community has been watching PepsiCo's journey in digital transformation on the insight side, the rise of Ada as a platform and the skill development that folks within the team are actually leading. Talk to us about the big changes that you're seeing in your day-to-day based on the fact that Insights has kind of better connected, democratized, as you said, but how it's also impacting people around the world. Like you sort of touched on it, but I'd love to unpack it a little bit more with you.
I think there's a few things. The journey, as we've standardized and we've rolled out some of these tools, there's a couple of things that it gains for us. One, gosh, our marketing is just getting better. So thank you for that. Because you've been a wonderful partner on that journey and helping us to figure out, hey, what is making it, what is resonating? How do we just get better and better? So I think, gosh, that's been a wonderful thing. The other side of it is having these common tools, common languages, but also starting to be able to dimensionalize impact and return for some of the investments that we're making is also allowing us to have a much more effective conversation cross-functionally. And people within PepsiCo are starting to look at the tools and understand what marketing does and some of the nuances behind it. And I think that lends credibility to the work that we're doing, the value that the function can offer, and really allows people to see that it is an investment that we're making to build our brands and to build those connections with our consumers for the long term, and that it's very much worthwhile. So I think that's a lovely outcome of this transformation.
Absolutely. I had a chance to interview a brand director in London, an insights partner within PepsiCo for Walkers. And it struck me that y'all have moved from testing to learning genuinely as an organization. And that was always a tension between a brand director and an insights manager of stop grading my homework, help me make it better. And so you know, to start to see that impact show up in dozens of countries around the world is I think inspiring for this whole community that we actually can work better together and make moves here.
Just to build on that, Ryan, one of the things that I think is so important in what you talked about is, hey, am I testing to go forward, or am I learning as I go? And we had this awesome training last week, and one of the things was, hey, are we taking time to reflect backwards and learn? Because the fastest way to accelerate your way forward is to just say, what am I doing great? And how do I lean in more and more on that? And I think if you're testing to just get to yes, you're only looking forward. But if you're testing to learn, you are taking a moment to be reflective, understand the why behind it, and then take that why and pour it into all the work that you do moving forward. It's a very different mindset when you're testing to learn versus testing for a check the box.
What I find motivating about what you say there, and also at the beginning of sort of long term, is I think so often we get crippled by these short term Wall Street cycles that take away infinite thinking. I don't know if you've read of any of Simon Sinek's latest stuff around this notion of like, we're not playing a football game, we're building sustained businesses. So I think you being a leader, giving people the permission to think long term is quite inspiring. So I want to change gears a little bit because I want to talk to you a little bit about digital marketing. It's changing a lot of things. And so the first thing I'd like to ask you is, where do you see this tension between personalization at scale and data privacy going? It's, every week there's a new article. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do. Consumers want personalized messaging, but they also want their data protected. Talk to us a little bit about how you see this challenge and where it goes.
It's a tricky one, right? And you said it's this paradox because every single thing that you read and everything that we see actually in the market is consumers do want to see things that are relevant to them. It's noisy, it's cluttery, it's kind of annoying when I'm served up things that really are completely irrelevant. So there is a sense of respect for the consumer that we should be serving them up a more personalized experience. But it also means that, gosh, we're getting to know them a little bit better, and there's personal information involved in that. So there's definitely a tension. And it's also what people feel comfortable with is very personal. There might be data that some people have no issue sharing and that others want to keep quite close. So there's a few things in this dilemma. One, I think you just have to be very clear and transparent of, hey, how will we use your data? And share that with folks. If you're collecting it, how do you make sure you do that? How are you giving them an easy way to engage, adjust settings, et cetera? So are we being clear and transparent as we're collecting data? And then, my goodness, we have an incredible responsibility to protect that and safeguard it. And that gets into just more of an ethical and values related question more than anything else. Because you're now changing your mind of, hey, how can I think differently about transacting and make money? And you're saying, hey, I need to respect what this gift is that people just gave me, which is personal information. So I think with personalization, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also great responsibility. And I think the best thing that we can do is just be transparent about what we're doing and certainly have security and safeguards in place. And there's a constant evolution. I think that's the other challenge. People's awareness to, hey, just what data is out there. It's very different. People are tuning into that. They're understanding it more and more. So I think we just have to be constantly evolving.
Love it. So you set the tone of what we're going to share and how you're going to manage it, and then follow through on that promise. And so it's great because it sort of shields you and your organization from compliance, governance, a changing landscape around you. It's something we
need to do all those things, right? We have to be legal and we want to make sure we have governance. But I think you also want to set your own ethical standards for what does it mean to, respect consumer information, because sometimes those standards might be higher than where the regulatory bar is set.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's stay on digital for a few minutes, digital marketing. And someday we'll just call it marketing again, I hope. But we still call it digital marketing. So we'll stay there for today. There's the rise of digital media buying, digital creative fascinated me because we were able to know so much of what people did and why, and even build lookalike models of where they came from. There's now this emergence of why data in that world. And I'm really curious to see how you incorporate the what data and the why data that you're starting to get access to, whether it be stuff that Stefan and his team are doing, Sham's doing, other folks within the team.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of that reflection where you'd say, hey, we're learning things about this. How do we continue to get smarter? And the why data matters. A/B testing is interesting, but you want to know why A or B won. So the next time you can do an even smarter version of that. So I think just making sure that you're doing that reflective exercise, that you're but that you're also going in there intelligently. I think also maybe others are different, but I think sometimes we would just do a proliferation. We'd say, we're going to test all these things anyway, so let's just throw spaghetti at the wall almost. And I think you need to be, as you start to bring in more of that why information and understanding, I think you're a little bit more choiceful about what's going in, and your learning curve is better. So I think I think just being reflective, constantly learning helps you bring in some of the why and not just the why.
And do you see a behavior change challenge that's big in terms of getting the programmatic desks and all these other places to incorporate Y data, or do you feel like they're yearning for it from what you see?
Actually, it's interesting. I think they're yearning for it, at least within our teams. Because what we realize is we can all do such a better job when we incorporate the Y data, that it's far more effective, and that's what people are motivated to do. Everyone's motivated to do a better job than they did the day before. Like, my goodness, people want to be successful. They want to do a good job. And so what I've found within our teams is they're yearning for more and more of that Y data so they can be better. Initially, is there some resistance? Is there a learning curve? Absolutely. But once people understand that process, gosh, it's they ask for more and more.
That's motivating to hear. I'm glad that's what you're seeing. I felt some tension probably 2-3 years ago, but I'm personally also seeing the tide shift a bit, which is good. So let's talk about, you said this a little bit about consumer trends and what's changing and what's not. So we were talking about this in the pre-show. We both like our Pelotons, which means we're into our wellness, but I can guarantee you there will be Doritos on the side of my turkey sandwich after this.
That's okay. It's about balance, and it's your personal choice.
So how do you balance that? So you've got to build and maintain these iconic brands that are part of culture. Gatorade, we saw in the beginning. There's so many iconic brands, which PepsiCo has had the really benefit of building and sustaining over time. But also you have M&A strategies that are bringing new innovations in. You're incubating new innovations in the organization. And so how do you balance those, the growth of let's just pick on Doritos for a minute, the growth of a Doritos with the emergence of a Stacy's or another kind of upshot brand that you're building on the fly?
Very carefully is what I would say. Now, this is where a lot of the portfolio strategy and portfolio understanding comes into play. And I also think this is where you just need to be ninjas at understanding consumer benefits, consumer opportunity, and also our brand profiles and what our brand promise is. Do we have very well defined brand purpose, guardrails, understand what the meaning of our brand is to ourselves, to our consumers, and what that promise will translate into as you're thinking about new benefit spaces, because it'll give you a place to say, okay, this can stretch to a certain place. I probably shouldn't stretch it here. So I think knowing where your brand can go is important, but also where it shouldn't, and having the discipline to know when to stop. So, an example, can we stretch Cheetos into mac and cheese? Can we? Well, we did, last year, the US team stretched and they pushed Cheetos into mac and cheese, but it was a journey, and it was a deliberate journey, right? We had done some partnerships and away from home with mac and cheese. We had seen consumers actually doing this out in the world and putting Cheetos and mac and cheese. There was a pull for it, and there was permission from consumers, and there was a need in the marketplace to take this fun, tasty brand and infuse it into a product that needed a bit of a boost. And it's great. People put it in there, new benefit, new occasion, great place for a brand to stretch. There's other consumer opportunities, though, that you would look into the marketplace and say, do we have a brand to stretch? And this is where it's important to understand when the answer is yes and when the answer is no. And I think Bubbly is a great example of us staring at our brand portfolio and saying, gosh, do we have something that stretches and that can stand for, attract this consumer, really go after the opportunity? Or do we need to create something new? And I'll tell you, there was a lot of exploration in that. And ultimately the decision was, you need this new brand, you need Bubbly. And it's the right decision. And it's worked very well for us. So I think you have to truly understand the brands, why they stretch, how they stretch, who they're going after, and not dilute the meaning. And we have plenty of examples where we've, maybe gone a little bit of astray and then pulled back. Everybody makes mistakes. But I think really forcing that diagnostic and then being sharp about saying yes or no is important.
I love that kind of portfolio self-awareness too. And it also shows up in some of the insights tooling that I've seen the teams use. I mean, if you can spot early stage what a brand's potential is, then you can do different things. It's interesting to watch the rise of Bubbly, because I think if we had this chat in 2 years, maybe that's an anecdote. I'm saying another mainstay brand, because that's what it's becoming very quickly in the marketplace, which is really great. Kate on the insights team always makes fun of me because I drink a bunch of them.
I drink a lot of Bubbly.
What's your favorite flavor? Let's hear it.
I think grapefruit is my favorite. The pink one. It's
Good
really
choice.
good. Yeah.
I've recently switched to cranberry. Very, very good. But I'm also a grapefruit person. I really like it.
Blackberry is quite good too. My favorite is actually, I take them with me everywhere. Sometimes I'll leave them in the car. And if I accidentally leave it in the car, go in, come back, the car smells wonderful. I mean, it's amazing.
You just leave it open?
I just leave it open, and the car smells amazing. So it's kind of like a little air freshener for my car. Love it.
Is this a new brand extension play, Jen? You heard it here.
I don't think we should market it that way, but it's a lovely halo impact.
I dig it. I will try this afternoon. So we're running short of time. There's a few more things I want to ask you. So we'll transition away from the incredible brand building strategy that you've got. And there's so many people in the chat blowing up like, do we have permission from consumers, which is such a really great way to say it. So let's talk about capability building for a moment. So you're in a role that looks at, I mean, thousands of employees, hundreds of brands, and hundreds of companies. And so you need to be able to enable local experimentation, but also find the best stuff and scale it. And that push and pull obviously creates a tension. So how do you balance that in an organization that rightfully has to be locally centric in the places that it operates?
There's it's definitely a balancing act on this one. There's a couple of things that we consider. One is as we do experiments, making sure that we understand the scope of what we're doing really matters. And I would say what we focus on building globally is how we should do things. As you think about a methodology or a tool or a way to analyze a market, really thinking about how as the enabler versus the what. We want the local teams who are closest to the consumer, who are closest to the culture, who are closest to understanding the nuance of humor and other aspects to figure out the what. But what we shouldn't be spending time on is recreating the how behind it. Frameworks, methodologies, strategic structures. So that's understanding the sandbox is one really important part of that global local relationship. The other thing that I would say is whenever we find an opportunity where we stare at our tools or various things and we say, gosh, we have an outage, we'll figure out a market that is the right one to pilot things, because you have to start from somewhere. You have to start from a local market, build the skill set, try it out, test different ways of doing things, and then figure out from there, now how do I expand that? And there's various profiles that you'll look at for understanding where to market. Hey, is the data available? Is the team ready, willing, and able to partner with you on the journey? There's so many different nuances and just figuring out, hey, have we selected the right partner? But then taking that and saying, okay, this is a starting point, and then I see a roadmap for expansion, is how we've done that. And that pilot approach, when you have the market, it's amazing because, again, people want to be more successful in their job. So if you show them a tool and you say, gosh, you might be facing the same tension, let me show you a business case of somebody else who is facing that same thing and how we've solved for it. All of a sudden, it becomes pull, not push. So we do try to figure out who's going to be that partner in building the initial business cases. We do have to shop it around. It's not like it's magical and all those things are without tension. That would be the wrong way of representing things. But there is a change management aspect of thinking through even capability building within an organization.
It's great. Thank you, Jen. So I've asked this question to a few other people. Let's just say I'm somebody sitting and I work for a company that's not yours. And I'm sitting in Poland and I see an outage, what advice would you have for me to mobilize and bring it to the attention of the right people to actually institutionalize it or experiment it? I think a lot of times, Jen, people get stuck with, well, this is how we do it, and there's stuff happening above, and so I can't drive change. What advice do you have for somebody on the ground, for lack of a better word?
We have this. We have a cultural framework that we call the PepsiCo way, and I think one of the areas that we really try to stress, there's two, I would say, that are relevant. One is voice your opinions fearlessly. And I think it's so well written with the end of fearlessly. I think if you see an outage, you have to speak up. You have to, share that with people. I wouldn't hold it in and let that fester, because you can make an impact, right? And then the second one that sort of matches with that is this idea of always acting as an owner. And that's what you would do. If you were an owner in that company, you would speak up. There is an outage that you recognize. You're going to voice your opinion, and you are going to act like an owner to stand up and try to solve it. Now, there's things about an organization that implies. One, are we willing to listen? Or are we so hierarchical that the system sort of stamps that down? Well, our hope would be that these cultural, values are showcasing, hey, we want to listen because we want you to voice your opinions fearlessly, and we want you to act as an owner. So I think you can, and what businesses don't want their employees to raise outages or raise opportunities up to them. So I think I would encourage people who see those things to, hey, just be brave, voice your opinion, call out those things where you see there's an opportunity to improve, but I would do it with purpose as well. It's important to call out the outages, but I also think it's important to think about one or two steps forward. Hey, what are your ideas to help solve for that? What are your observations, right? Just saying something is a problem is a step, but I do think it's important that people take on the responsibility of also trying to solve things as they raise those issues. So for me, that's what I would encourage you to do, Ryan, if you see one of those things.
Thank you, Jen. I love the last part, right? So own it, act like the CEO, but don't just tell me there's a problem.
That's truly what acting like an owner is. It's calling it out, but it's also taking responsibility. And partially, and maybe you don't have the full capability to do that, but get one or two steps in and show the business case for it.
I love it. So Ariana, for the first time at the summit, is going to run out of space on our mural here. It's really quite cool to look at all the ground we've covered today.
I had to make it really small because I kept looking at it and I was like, oh gosh, I'm distracted by it. And I started to get self-conscious about what I was saying. So I was like, I'm making it really small.
So it's hidden now. We'll send it to you after so you can have it.
That's awesome.
I have two more questions for you. The first question I want to ask you, sorry, I was reading my note wrong. So what are some of the areas you personally are laser focused on right now? What are some of the big priorities on your desk today?
We're spending a lot of time on creative excellence right now. And there's so much to creative excellence. My goodness, there's the discipline of how we manage our agencies. There's the discipline for how we learn about what works. And we talked about the ADA tool, which is awesome. So thank you for your partnership on that. And then there's just a discipline to brand positioning and some of the basics. So I would say creative excellence is really where we're spending a lot of time and energy to make sure that we have, strong brands that resonate with consumers and that we're engaging in conversation in a way that's meaningful and a way that, builds a long-term relationship and doing that in an efficient and effective way. Isn't that what every marketer is shooting for? So that's what we're laser focused on.
I like that it's some marketers are probably just shooting for con awards. It's sad truth. You are actually shooting for excellence, which has a lot of components to it. So everybody should listen to you on this topic. So, we
don't mind collecting a few awards along the way, just to be clear.
You're fine with the awards too. It's just not.
We're good with those.
I dig it. Okay. Everybody always wants to know, CMOs, what are the signals they rely on? What are some of the dashboards, data sets, signals that you rely on to keep a pulse on the consumer, but also the business as you go day to day?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we look at the business and the numbers and the typical signals. I think the tools and the dashboards that we have this system that we call 360 Always On. That's just a compilation of really listening to environmental signals and the pulse of humans, which is really nice. So I think there is some of those broader signals that we're tapping into. And I think some that are related to our business, but I think importantly in that 360 Always On, it's really about, hey, just what's the mood? What's the mood? What are just kind of, how are people feeling? And I think it's really important for brands like ours that are, they move with culture. So we have to understand what's happening now, but also have this ability to kind of look into the future and make sure that we're thinking about, are we building something that's relevant for the long haul, but also are we having conversations that are relevant today? And then we're also looking at just basic engagement and interaction, community management. You learn a ton, just a ton, by looking at your own social media and understanding what consumers are talking about. I think listening, outside of curiosity, I think listening is the other skill set that every marketer really needs. And the great news is there's so many tools now that help us listen better.
I love it because we had SoFi Financial speak to us yesterday, and that was one of the big signals too, is like just get in your member communities and listen to them. And I think it's cool for a company of your size, you have the same sort of tactic because people are real in those formats. They're just going to tell you what they think.
Some of our best ideas, Ryan, have come from just listening and observing what people are doing with our products, and then taking that and saying, what could we do here? And it's fun. It's really fun.
I love it. All right. I have one more question for you. You are a powerhouse. I'm very pleased that I've gotten to know you and got to meet you. But where do you get your own inspiration from? Where do you grow? Where do you learn? Where do you get inspired?
Okay. Inspiration. I think there's different kinds of inspiration that I look for. There's sometimes you need inspiration, just like, hey, courage to do something, and gosh, can I do this? And I think in those moments, I'll just I go for a hike or spend time outside or something like that. I need to find peace when I'm looking for that kind of inspiration. There's other times where you need inspiration that's more like a collision, right? I need new ideas. I need inspiration to be creative. And I think then you just try to expose yourself to something that's just wildly different. What have I never read about before or never listened to before? I used to, when I was commuting, I would just listen to random radio stations and just understand like, hey, this is what people are talking about or what they're thinking, and not something that I would choose, because I think collisions matter, and that's how we get more creative. So I think seeking out and experiencing things that are just new and different, or hey, creative inspiration comes that way. And then I think there's just the people that I work with and work around in my family give me tons of inspiration. And they often have so many great ideas, just listening to their passion, their enthusiasm, and then saying, gosh, how can we go make that happen? And so I'd say the great outdoors, doing something different, and then the circle that I surround myself with. Those are probably three sources of awesome inspiration.
Amazing. I could talk to you all day, but you're a very busy woman and we are out of time. I would just like to thank you on behalf of this whole community for investing the time here. I personally learned a ton. And I just can't thank you enough for joining us, Jen. So thanks again.
Thanks, Ryan. It was a ton of fun. So appreciate it.
Thank you both so much. That was incredible to listen to. And as Ryan mentioned, incredible to watch as Ariana ran out of room on the live note taking. I'm pretty mind blown right now. And also I know Jennifer and Ryan, you probably couldn't really see everything coming in the chat, but thank you to everyone on the line for just engaging in this conversation and digging in. That is what makes this summit so special. And as much as I want live events to come back, one thing that I'm loving about the virtual events is the ability to do that, because in person, you're all sitting there and it would be really rude to have a side conversation. But here, the side conversation adds impact to what's being said. So thank you everyone for engaging.